everybody. Hope you're having a great day, a great beginning of your week. We're so happy to be here with you.
It was another kind of weird weather day here. It was so windy all afternoon and like 90. When I looked at the thermometer, it was like 93 degrees, but it was like, it was just a strange day. But it feels good to sit down for a while and spend some time with you guys.
So as always, we want to just introduce the people that are helping us today. Rich and Shelly from Air to Ground Farms are helping us.
And Air to Ground Meats.
And Air to Ground Meats. Yes, they are going to be helping moderate today. And Rich is the one who's so nice to feed us questions from you guys to make sure that we answer all of them. So Rich and Shelly, like Kevin said, they raise a bunch of proteins for the area. They raise beef, pork, lamb, and chicken, and they actually have a store in Ava, which is super cool. Air to Ground Meats, that's a photo of the front of their store. So we just wanted to give them a shout out, give them some props because they're so nice to be available for us Mondays at 6 to help us.
They also have a YouTube channel, so check out their YouTube channel.
Yes. And also, hopefully, you know what? I didn't ask Gavin if he's available.
I'm sure he's here.
Generally, Gavin helps us. Gavin, if you are helping, make sure that you let everybody know in the comments to say hello. But Gavin is our wonderful son-in-law. But we also want to let you all know that he is an amazing realtor. There's his name, Gavin Reed from Action Realty. And go ahead and you talk. Sorry.
So when you all move to Ava,
or Douglas County,
or Douglas County, because
yeah.
Ava's pretty small. Douglas County is pretty big, though.
Yeah.
Make sure you call Gavin because he has lived here his entire life, and his family knows the area really well. Gavin knows the area really well. He'll be able to find you a perfect spot. Yeah,
Gavin's family farms.
Right.
And so Gavin knows about all the awesome places around here and really has a good feel for the kind of land around here and what you'd want depending on your needs and stuff like that. So make sure you contact him.
I'll tell you a funny story about Gavin. When he came to ask me, so our daughter Grace and Gavin dated since they were 16 years old. And when Gavin came to ask me if he could ask Grace to marry him, he knew how much it was like this time of year. It was like October when he came to ask me. And he knew how much I like candy corn. So he showed up with a bag of candy corn to sweeten the deal a little bit. So I told him if he would have brought 2 bags, it would have been even better. But he's a great son-in-law, and we're glad to have him.
Yeah. So Kevin said yes.
Yeah. Obviously, because they've been married over a year now.
So did Grace.
Right.
So that's awesome. So the most exciting.
And since we do keto now, I don't eat candy corn anymore. Maybe a little bit every year.
But you know what? You tried some this year, and it made you so sick.
I know, because it really is so sweet.
There's still some in the.
Still so good, though.
There's still some in the pantry.
Maybe I'll go get some.
You probably won't. Maybe so bad. Feel so bad. Okay, so the most exciting news for this week, we've kind of been talking about it the last few weeks, but it actually happened.
Right.
We now have fiber internet.
Yay. You guys, it has been absolutely amazing. So we uploaded the video that you guys hopefully saw. If not, go watch it. It came out on Saturday. It was us taking Watson to the vet. That video would have normally taken about 2.5, maybe 3 hours to upload. It took 7 minutes to upload that video.
Yep.
And I also do
in 4K.
In 4K, yeah. So it was a huge file.
Right.
So that was amazing.
Right.
I also do all the videos for our church. I upload all the sermons every week, and those are over an hour long. And the video this week for church took under 10 minutes to upload. So absolutely amazing.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We also want to, speaking of one of our videos from this past week, want to give you guys an update on Watson, who we had to take to the vet.
Right. He's doing great. He's doing a lot better. That little boot thing, shoe thing that they glued onto his foot is still on there. We're hoping it's going to stay on at least for a couple, maybe 3 weeks. If it can stay on a month, that would be even better. But the vet said if it can stay on for, a few weeks, that would be great. So when we went out there earlier today, he didn't appear to be limping at all. So hopefully that means that everything is healing up really well.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys may have noticed that a couple days ago, I can't remember how many days ago, we actually posted a question on our YouTube community tab, on Facebook, and on Instagram, asking if you guys have any questions about raising small herds of cattle on your land or your future land. And we got tons of questions.
Right, because we put it out there on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So we got a lot of response.
Right. And so what we did is we kind of categorized all of those questions, and we are going to be answering those kind of more like in a format like, this is what we do here, and hopefully that'll answer a lot of your questions.
I'll tell you a disclaimer. We are by no means cattle experts. We have been raising cattle now for 4 years. I mean, a little over our beef cattle for about 4 years now. And then our dairy cow, we had a little bit before that. But as far as beef cattle, which is what we're going to focus on tonight, it's been about 4 years that we've been raising them now. And I think we've learned the basics for sure. And I think we're getting pretty good at it.
So we're talking about that today. And when I think of beef, I think of like the "Where's the Beef" old lady commercial. I think that was from Wendy's.
That shows your age. Was it Wendy's? I thought it was Burger King.
No, I think it was Wendy's.
Okay.
So anyway, I came up with this little image that I thought was funny.
It is funny.
I'm probably the only one that thinks that's funny. Anyway, so
I want to know, where's the teeth?
Where's the teeth? She broke it on some other burger at another restaurant somewhere. Okay, so we are going to be talking about our beef herd and our small herd.
Right.
So go ahead. Why we have beef cows? We're going to talk about that first.
Right. So we have beef cattle for a few reasons. They're all important. The main thing is when you have a lot of land, beef cattle can absolutely help with land management. So if we did not have the beef cattle here on our property, first of all, we'd have a ton of bush hogging to do, a ton of mowing to do. And honestly, a lot of our property, which it may not show on video, but it's very steep hills on a lot of our property. Now, when we do videos, we always level out the camera, so you may not notice it that much, but our cattle go up and down hills all day long. Yeah. We really only have a few flat spots. Our hayfield is pretty flat. Our, what we call the dairy pasture, that's pretty flat. And then the government pond area, that's pretty flat. But everything else is pretty much on a hill, and way too steep of a hill to mow or go on with a tractor.
Right.
And way too rocky as well.
So it'd be really wild without them. Another reason why we raise beef cattle is for meat for our family.
Right.
Yeah. That's something that's really important to us. And prior to raising beef, our red meat would come from venison.
Right.
And occasionally we would, I guess one time we raised a meat goat.
Right.
Otherwise we would buy like a half side of beef from a farm or a quarter side of beef or something like that.
We didn't do that very often.
No. And there were times where we didn't eat any red meat because we didn't raise it and we were out of venison.
Right. Yeah. So definitely for meat. And then the last thing is as a source of income for the homestead. And we're actually going to kind of get into more of that a little bit. But we're actually planning on increasing the number of beef cattle that we have, because it's really, as far as animals go on the homestead, it's the moneymaker for the homestead.
Yeah. Also, it's really easy.
Right. Cattle are intimidating because they're so big, but as far as the amount of work every day and really just the ease of having them, they're very hands off. I mean, it's work in the winter when you need to feed hay. But other than that, it's pretty much hands off. You just make sure they're okay and make sure your fences are okay, and they pretty much take care of themselves. Yeah.
So as far as our beef herd goes, now we're not going to be talking about dairy today because that really is kind of a separate topic. As far as permanent beef cow mamas and heifers, we have 15 on our homestead.
Maybe we should explain some of the terms first, just in case people don't know what everything is.
Go ahead.
So everything is cattle, right?
Mhm.
All of them are cattle.
Right.
And then you have your bulls, which are intact males.
Yes, that have their testicles.
Right. Bull calves, which are just young intact males. And then steers, which are castrated males,
Yes.
or bulls that have been castrated. Then on the other side, you have heifers, which are females that have not had babies yet. So they are heifers until they've had their second calf. When they have their first calf, they're called first calf heifers, and when they've had their second calf, they're finally called cows. So that's kind of how the terminology goes. I'll be honest, a lot of times we just refer to them all as cows. When we say, let's go check on the cows, it might be cows, steers, bulls, everything out there. It's just easier to say, let's go check on the cows.
Right. So we have 15 permanent females that will continue on and on, a combination of cows and heifers.
Right.
We currently have one bull, as y'all know, and we have one bull calf yet.
Right.
And
two steers.
Three steers. Yeah.
Yes.
And then we have our dairy cow, which we're not really going to be talking about today. So that's what we have. But so we're considering the 15 females as basically our permanent herd.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as Kevin said, as Kevin said, our land can support more than that.
Right.
And the previous owner had a total of 30 permanent cows, cattle, and their calves.
Right.
Yeah. So over the years, we may increase the number of permanent.
I think I would like to get to about 25 mama cows.
And we really have enough grass and pasture to support that many.
Right.
And because one of the main reasons we have them is land management, we would like that number to increase so they can continue doing a good job managing the land here.
Right.
Yeah. Now the breed that we are raising. Why don't you talk about that?
So our cows are mainly Herefords. Now they have been bred in the past. They've been crossed with Limousine, which is another red cattle. And so the previous owner always kept Herefords, and then they would switch between a Limousine and a Hereford bull. They'd go back and forth because they liked that cross. And there was a time actually back, I don't know, when was it? Like 60s, 70s, when that was a very popular cross, was the Limousine Hereford cross, because the Limousines grew a little bit bigger and a little bit faster than the Herefords, but the Herefords are so calm and gentle that it just made them really easy to work with.
Right.
We really like the Herefords in general. We like the Herefords the best. So we always have been, this is now our second Hereford bull. So in a way, we're kind of starting to breed the Limousine back out of the herd, and we're heading more toward just Herefords, which are the white-faced cows. And we really like those the best.
Yeah.
They're so gentle. They're so calm. As long as you're calm around them, they stay very calm.
Yes. The Herefords are also good mamas.
Right.
They're all polled. And that means that is spelled Polled. They're polled. That means that they naturally do not grow horns.
Right.
So we don't need to worry about dehorning them.
Right.
Nice calves. They produce really nice sized calves. We prefer I call them brown, but they're really red cows over black cows. We have heard through our studying and everything that the red or brown cows actually will graze more often during the summer than the black cows, like Black Angus, and spend less time cooling off in the ponds, which is good. That means they're continuing to eat, they're continuing to get big, and that kind of thing. So we're going to continue with the red cows also.
Yeah. Now, typically, and I'll tell you this from a pure like business standpoint, when you're taking cattle, especially to like a cattle auction, typically the black cows will get more money at an auction. So you do get a little bit less taking Herefords versus like Black Angus. It's not a huge difference. And to us, it's worth getting a little bit less to have nicer cattle. We have some other people around us that raise Black Angus. And I can tell you there's been a few times when some of them have gotten out and we see them on the road and we try to help get them back in. And they just always seem like very I don't know, like on edge and like much more skittish than
more high
our
strung. We
yeah.
have felt, and I'm sure that a lot of that, some of that has to do with how much the farmer or whatever interacts with them and how used to them they are. But
because we have we're considered very small with the amount of cattle that we have. So we spend time with them. They're used to us. We're around them a lot. Where a lot of the big cattle operations around here, I mean, they may have cattle on 10 different farms all over the county, and they really don't get that one-on-one interaction.
Right. So here on our homestead, on our farm, we have what's called a cow-calf operation. So that there are kind of two different directions that cattle farmers will go. They'll either be a cow-calf operation, or they will raise steers and heifers, but normally steers. They'll finish them out. Right. To either sell them finished to like a butcher, or like Rich and Shelly do, they raise them up, take them to the butcher, and then they sell the meat by the pound at a store or whatever.
Right.
But like I said, we have decided to do a cow-calf operation. That's just what we prefer.
The part of it we really like.
Yeah.
Yeah. The nice thing, what we like about doing the cow-calf is that we can have more mama cows, more permanent, because the calves aren't eating a lot when they're here. And since we wean them at about 6 months of age, which is when they really are getting big enough to really start eating a significant amount of grass, when we wean them at 6 months of age is when we will sell them either to someone like Rich and Shelly so that they can finish them, or sell them to, at the auction or whatever. But we'll get rid of them before they really start eating a ton on our homestead.
Right. And in the finishing direction, those farmers have two choices also. They can grain finish, which will make those calves get big faster, but they're finished on grain, which some people don't like, and in our opinion isn't quite as healthy, but that's everybody's decision to make on their own. But if you grass finish, those animals take a total of 18 to 24 months.
Right. Really, so 24 months.
They're on your property eating, taking up space for a much longer amount of time.
Which just means you can have less of them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, when you're raising cattle and you're grain finishing, so you're giving them corn, you're giving them silage and all of that, they take about 18 months. You would slaughter them at about 18 months old.
I think some people push it like sooner than that.
Yeah, they do. They do.
Depending on when they start grain feeding them.
Right. But for grass fed like we do, or like what Rich and Shelly do, it's a good 2 years before they're ready to be processed. So it's a slower growth, but we think healthier meat in the long run.
Right. So in our cow-calf operation, there are a couple different directions that the calves will go. They can be held back for us and for our family to keep on property and finish out on grass so that they can feed us. We sell the calves to private buyers. For instance, actually, Rich and Shelly are going to be buying some of our calves here this year and possibly in future years, which is awesome. We could take those calves to the like the sale barn, they call it, which is a livestock auction. And generally, those calves are always sold or auctioned off at 6 months. It's generally when they're weaned. Or we could keep them back. Also to expand our herd if we wanted to keep back heifers to get a larger herd.
Most like bigger cattle farmers are going to take the majority of their cattle to the sale barn, to the auction. And those cattle will almost always get purchased into kind of the commercial meat market, where they'll be taken to like a feedlot where they'll be finished then mostly on corn and grain.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of interesting that in general, the calves that go to the auction to be grain finished are raised grass fed first.
For sure.
Yeah, it's kind of sad for me. So why don't you go over this?
Okay, so we get a ton of questions about how much land we have, and we don't always answer that question, but we've decided we will. So we have about 120 acres of land on our farm here, and all of it, for the most part, other than about 5 acres where we have our house, the greenhouse, our barns, and like our garden area, pretty much everything else is for the cattle.
Right.
So we have 6 five or six, five big paddocks that we rotate them through. So we do rotational grazing. One of the paddocks is really big. It's like 60 acres. But that one has a lot of hillside where it's mostly wooded.
Right.
It's not a lot of actual grazing area.
Right.
But that area is where we put them over the winter because we have spring fed water there. We don't have to break ice in the winter to give the cattle water. So that works out really well. So they're there all winter. And then during the months when it's growing, they're rotating usually about once a month between all of the paddocks.
Right. And that depends on the paddock size because the paddock sizes vary and like the terrain varies by paddock.
Right.
Some of them are like all grass. Some of them are mixed 50-50 with like really dense woods. And you'd be surprised how much the cattle enjoy just being in the woods. And they'll eat things in there too.
Right.
But we also do have a 20-acre hayfield.
Right. Yeah.
And at this time of the year, this year we actually decided to only do spring cutting.
Right.
And to save second cutting for our cows to just eat down.
Right.
And we did a whole video on that with our thought process.
Right.
We got a lot of feedback from you all about whether or not you thought we made a good decision. And overall, it looks like it was a great decision for us.
Yeah, because right now our cattle are still just on grass, and a lot of other people in our area are already having to feed hay because we're in a drought, basically.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if it's officially a drought, but we haven't gotten any significant amount of rain since I think the second week of August.
Yes.
So it's been really dry. Pretty much everything is dead, but our cows are out there. They're still grazing on what really we would consider like standing hay, which is dead grass that we just haven't cut. But we actually drove around the hayfield today on the UTV to check everything out, and they've still got quite a bit of grass out there. I'm really hoping that they'll get at least another 2 or 3 weeks out there.
Well, and also the paddock that we keep them in for winter, where we feed hay and that kind of thing, that's the biggest one where we've got the spring. It also still has grass. So they haven't eaten down. They haven't even been on that paddock for
few months.
Yeah. So that has some nice grass. So once we move them from the hayfield, they'll still have grass to eat. So it's possible we won't even have to start feeding hay until, it'd be great if we could hold off till December.
I'm hoping we'll make it till December or even maybe mid-December, which is what we did last year. It was like mid-December before we feed hay last year. Now, speaking of the amount of grass and how much you need for the amount of cattle, we get that question a ton. Is like how many acres do you need for the amount of cattle that you have? And that's a really tough question to answer because it really varies depending on where you live. Here in our area, the general consensus, I think, is about 2 acres per head of cattle if you want them to be on grass pretty much all the time, except, in the real winter time. But there are areas, like some of the desert areas where it might be like, 30 acres per head of cattle. So if you're new to raising cattle, you need to really find someone in your area who raises cattle and kind of ask them because it's so variable.
Exactly.
And there may be areas where you can't raise them at all on grass and you need to feed hay year round.
Right. Exactly.
So you need to figure that out specific to your area.
Now, one thing you wanted to talk about, Kevin, is the difference between a hayfield and pasture.
True.
And why a farmer won't typically cut a pasture for hay.
Right. And the reason I bring this up is because we get this question a lot from people who are either new to the area or new to raising cattle. And it goes something like they'll say, I just bought this farm and it's got 40 acres of grass and I can't find anybody who's willing to come over and cut it. A couple neighbors came over to look at it and they said they won't cut the hay on it for me. And I don't understand why. And the first question I always ask is, well, is it a hayfield or is it a pasture? And typically they don't know the answer to that. And I said, well, typically a pasture might have rocks in it, might be like just not really good land for running hay equipment on.
Right.
Where a hayfield has typically either the rocks have been pushed into the ground or they've all been removed and it's been like cleared specifically for cutting hay.
Right.
because hay equipment is really expensive, and no farmer wants to run his hay equipment over huge rocks and break hay equipment, because it not only can be a big setback because hay season is a lot of work, but it also can be very expensive. So a lot of times you might buy 40 acres of land that's great for having a grazing pasture, but it might not be suitable for cutting hay at all.
Exactly.
And that's typically the case in
Right.
those situations. So when we say our hay field, like it's like 22 or 23 acres, there's not a rock on that hay field. It's
Right.
smooth. There's no rocks. There's nothing out there that would break hay equipment.
Right.
But all of our pastures, man, you got to be careful. Even my UTV might hit big rocks when we're driving around those. So.
Right. And what we actually get a lot of questions is when we show the pastures and stuff that, oh, it looks like you need to bush hog your pastures. And honestly, it does look like we need to bush hog our pastures. And Kevin does in the areas that don't have crazy rocks.
Right.
I mean, the Ozarks, you guys have like rocks that come out of nowhere.
Well, you might see a rock sticking out of the ground, like, it might stick out of the ground a foot or two. And I'm telling you, like, that's the tip of a mountain.
It's like an iceberg. The iceberg.
Like there might be like 15 feet of rock underground connected to that, and you're never going to get it out.
Exactly.
So, that's just the way it is here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Let's talk about fencing.
All right.
We mostly have 4 or 5 strand of barbed wire. That's what we use to keep our cattle in. Now that would not be okay for goats. I don't even know about sheep. They sometimes have a mind of their own. Right, Rich and Shelly.
We get a lot of questions about why we don't put goats on to help clear some of our land, and it's because our fencing is not suitable for goats at all.
No.
And the terrain on our place to redo all of that fencing, there's no way.
Right.
It would take me the rest of my life.
We have interior electric fencing, which we use polywire. Is that what that's called?
Yep.
And so we use
braided wire.
Yeah. So we use that like as internal fencing if we're going to divide a pasture in half, or if there are some areas, especially near the road, where the fencing is kind of old and we haven't had a chance to redo it all. So
the barbed wire fencing.
Yeah. So we've just run electric along those as well, just to make sure that the cows don't try to test that.
Right.
So really, those are the 2 primary types of fencing that we have that we use, and they're both very effective.
Right. Yeah. I really like having a physical fence for perimeter.
Yeah.
So that they stay, everything stays on your property. But then for cross fencing, electric is great. If an animal gets through a cross fence, it's not the end of the world. If they get through a perimeter fence and make it onto the road and cause an accident or something like that, or just run away, that's a big deal.
Right. We would not trust our cows just on electric wire on an exterior fence, especially like one bordering your neighbors.
Right.
Because we really think that there's too much risk there for it to fail, and then you've got cows on the road, and that is not a safe situation for anybody.
And it's a way to make bad neighbors real fast.
Well, and it's a huge liability.
Right. Right.
Let's see. Oh, working and loading facilities.
True.
So this is something that we had no idea was going to be important to us. Or necessary when we first got into raising cattle.
Right.
Because prior to that, we had always had animals, I guess with the exception of pigs, that we could like just kind of lift up into the trailer.
Or push.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're not going to push a cow.
No. And they're so big, it's a huge safety issue. So we have a corral that is hooked up to a very short alley and is connected to a squeeze chute.
Right.
Now, we will admit to you, as you may have seen in our last video, that our loading facilities are old.
Right.
And they're not very safe.
Right.
And so that's actually a project that we are going to be working on very soon.
Right.
Because every time we try to load cattle or work them, which means give them injections and that kind of thing,
deworm them.
We realize how risky our current setup is.
Right. Yeah. So even though we have a squeeze chute, and once they're in the squeeze chute, things are safe, it's getting them into that section that
Mm-hmm.
we're actually going to move our entire working facilities to another part of the homestead. So not going to spoil it any more than that, but we've got some plans probably within the next month, I would hope, before real winter sets in.
Right. One piece of equipment that we use quite often and that is very helpful, but not required, but is very helpful, is a tractor.
Right.
What kind of tractor do we have?
So I have an LS tractor. We have an LS tractor. I say me.
I do drive it.
She does drive it, yeah. But I do the oil changes on it, so it makes it my tractor.
Okay. It can be your tractor.
So I have an LS tractor. Mine is a 47 horse, which for feeding the large round bales of hay, honestly, is about the smallest tractor I would recommend. Even mine sometimes doesn't struggle, but I the round bales that we feed weigh about 800 pounds, maybe even a little more. And if I didn't have liquid filled tires, if I didn't have liquid in the back tires of my tractor, it would lift the back end of my tractor off the ground. So you definitely need something at least that size if you're going to be feeding the large round bales, unless you're going to do like one of the unrollers that can go behind a UTV or ATV, something like that. You could do that.
Right.
Or if you're feeding the small square bales that you can just lift up, you could do that as well without a tractor. But
right.
If you're feeding large round bales like the way that we do, you really need a tractor.
Right. Let's talk a little bit while we're talking about hay. Let's talk about how much hay our cows go through in the winter so that people have a general idea, and maybe talk a little bit about the different sizes of hay bales that people can get.
Sure. So typically with the round bales, there's two real sizes, at least in our area. Now some places have these huge square bales. I mean, but in our area, what's typical is either what they call large round bales or small round bales or small square bales. So large round bales are typically 800 to 1,000 pounds. Small square bales, I think, are normally like 400 or 500 pounds. And then, the square bales are,
I think they're like 40 pounds. Yeah. That's what they were for goats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our cows, what do our cows
Our cows go through normally a bale every other day in the winter of the large round bales. So about 20 head of cattle that are eating off of that, and we're going through about one every other day.
Or every 3 days.
Yeah.
Depending on how much they eat, sometimes it's every other day, sometimes it's every 3 days.
But I'll tell you this, they want a new bale like every 12 hours. You need some tough love when you have cattle.
Well, even right now.
Right. Well, the reason we drove around the hayfield today is because they're out there bawling, acting like they're out of grass. Yeah. And so we drove around and they still have a ton of grass. Yeah. So, yes, you need to assert some tough love when you're in the cattle business.
Yeah, because they sound pathetic.
They do.
They do. And let's talk about trailer, whether or not they need a trailer and what trailer we use.
So we just have a small cattle trailer. Livestock trailer. Yeah. And so that's one thing. If you're shopping for a trailer, especially if you're getting like a used trailer, which is what we have, ours was not new because they're expensive. Make sure when you're looking for a cattle trailer or a livestock trailer, not a horse trailer. A lot of times a horse trailer will have a divider in the middle. We originally had a horse trailer, and that's what we would move pigs and things in. But when you get into cattle, you don't want one that has that divider down the middle if it's a small trailer, because cattle are too wide to make it through that divider, which we learned the hard way. So you want a wide open trailer. And a lot of times also on a horse trailer, it will have a back door, door that like folds down to a ramp, because horses are trained to like walk in and out on a lead. But cattle do not. No. So cattle, you need a door that either swings open this way or slide so that when they get in, you can shut it and keep them in. So ours is only I think it's a 12-foot, maybe a 14-foot. I think it's 12. I think it's a 12-foot trailer. And that'll hold, like when we're moving like young ones that we've just weaned, we can move like 3 at a time. Yeah. When we're doing someone like Tech or like Watson, it's pretty much Watson by himself. Yeah. But we use that thing for all kinds of things. Oh my gosh. We go to Menards, we get wood, we just pack that thing through. It's perfect for plywood and everything else. Absolutely. So, yeah. All kinds of things in there. Yeah. We want to talk about vaccines, whether or not we vaccinate our cows. And this can be kind of a touchy subject.
There are
What? Vaccines can be a touchy
We're not
subject.
going there. We're talking about cows. Okay, talking about cows.
Okay.
But there's still some divide. There are people that are very regimented about their vaccines. They give all the recommended ones on the correct time frame, all that kind of thing. There's also a whole nother group of people who raise cattle who people who raise them and people who buy them to finish them for their family, who they don't want cattle that have ever been vaccinated.
Right.
So what side of the pendulum are we on?
We're actually right in the middle. We have not vaccinated our main herd of cattle because they are a closed herd. They have been on this land for a very long time. Most of them were born on this land. The only exception to that is our bull, Watson, and he was vaccinated before he came here, and we got him from a very reputable breeder. Now, calves that we're weaning and selling, we ask whoever's buying them if they want them vaccinated or unvaccinated. Some people want them vaccinated before they come to their property, and some people who are very against vaccines say, no, I do not want any vaccines in my cattle, and we respect that as well. So we will do whatever the person buying them wants.
Yes. There is one exception to that, and that is tetanus antitoxin.
Right.
When we
which isn't really a vaccine, I don't
No,
think.
but it's a shot. I mean, you still give it to them.
Right.
When we're banding or castrating the animals, then we will give them the tetanus antitoxin, which is it's an immediate short-term use tetanus shot that covers that animal for the first 15 days after they've had that shot. So if they're exposed to tetanus during that time frame, that tetanus shot will keep them from getting tetanus.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of where we are on that. Now, I'll tell you, we are by no means against giving our animals whatever they need to be healthy.
Yes.
We don't overdo it, but we do deworm every year.
At least twice a year.
Because they
sometimes twice a year. Depends on how they're looking.
Right.
At least once a year.
But if they're full of parasites, they're not going to put on weight. They're not going to eat much. So we really deworm every year. If an animal is sick, like you just saw us take Watson to the vet, we're not against giving them antibiotics. Like he had a joint infection. When it comes down to either letting that spread and lose, a multi-$1,000 animal or give some antibiotics, we're 100% always going to give whatever it takes to get that animal healthy.
Yes. Now, fly control. This is something that we've had a lot of questions on, and we do actually have this question every time we show the cows in the summer.
Right.
And basically, we don't do anything for fly control.
No.
Because we move our cows, we rotationally graze them, and they have a large enough paddock that they're not standing in their own poo all the time. We have less fly problems than in like a feedlot.
Right.
The main reason why we don't use a fly control is because the main way that you do that is to pour poison on your cows, or put tags on their ears that spread the poison across their bodies. And we just don't want to do that. And we really don't feel like at this time it's necessary.
Right.
We've never had a case of, what's it called? Pink eye on our cows. And so at this time, we're not worried about flies.
Right.
It looks terrible for humans because it bothers humans so much more than it bothers the cattle.
Right.
Really does.
And we have had a lot of people ask why we don't put chickens in with the cattle and move chickens around with the cattle to eat the fly larvae out of their poop. Again, on our property where it's so rocky and the terrain, it would be impossible to do.
Well, mainly because, the terrain prevents us from putting up the netting that you see everybody use to keep them safe.
Right.
And they have a big spike that you're supposed to spike in your perfect ground. It's supposed to be all this wonderful, perfect thing.
Right.
Well, you just can't do that. Those spikes.
Not in most of our
land, spikes just don't go into the ground here. No. They go into rock.
Right.
And so it's too difficult for us to do.
I think we should move on to some questions.
Okay. So we're done?
What else do we have?
We have more.
Well, but we're 20 minutes left.
Okay. All right. So we'll save the rest of our stuff for another time. And so now we're going to move on to our general Q&A.
Right.
It doesn't have to be related to beef cows, but it sure can.
Right.
So let us know what questions you have. Up here. Well, Gavin Reed, I think, gave us a super chat. Is that what that said?
He said, yes. And here's what he said.
Oh, he's so
Here's enough
sweet.
for another bag of candy corn.
Oh, he's such a
All
good.
right. Well, I'll take the candy corn, but you got to keep the daughter.
Deal. Sold. Let's see. How many calves do you sell each year? I'm assuming calves. Well, depends on how many we have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we unless the last couple of years we've been, when we had our old bull yet, we were holding back heifers.
Mhm.
That's why we replaced our bull this year so that he could breed these heifers. So we haven't sold, and actually we had 2 years in a row where we had the majority of the calves that were born were heifers, which was great.
Right.
Now we hope for a lot of steers because we don't really need a whole lot more heifers, although we do want to hold a few more back.
Right.
But pretty much we'll sell everything that we get every year. So if we have 15 mama cows, hopefully we'll have 15 calves,
Yep.
and hopefully we'll sell the majority of those 15 calves.
We'll always hold at least 1 or 2 back
Right.
to raise up for meat for our family and for our girls and Kevin's parents, depending on who all wants those kinds of things.
Right.
But our hope is to sell them all.
Right. Yeah, because that is an income source on the homestead. So depending, and this was a question I know we were going to get to later on in our talk, but like depending on the year, you know, a 6-month-old calf will bring anywhere from, I'd say, $800 to $1,500, depending on what beef prices are at that time. So, you know, when you're selling 15 or 20 calves a year, that adds up, and
That's a good deal.
helps pay for all the other stuff that it takes to raise cattle.
Yes. Question from Dusty and Chelsea. Do you have any experience with Dexters? And if so, what were your pros and cons? We personally do not have any experience with Dexters. We do know that that is, number one, a little bit of a smaller breed, but often considered kind of a dual purpose breed for potentially milk and meat. We don't have a lot of experience with that.
Right.
I love my jerseys, so I'm not super interested in having a dual purpose. But I think Danny and Wanda keep Dexters.
Yeah,
so if you're
and a lot of people do, and they really like them.
Yeah. So Danny and Wanda are from Deep South Homestead.
Right.
So if you're interested in learning from them, they're always great to learn from.
I think Pete from Just a Few Acres, I think he raises Dexters too, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
One thing I will say, if you're raising beef just basically for your own needs, the smaller cattle like that can be great. But if you're raising them to sell into the kind of the commercial market, if you're taking them to the sale barn or selling them to someone who's really going to finish cattle, like Rich and Shelly do, or, you know, like a lot of other farmers in our area do, most of them are not going to want to buy small cattle from you. So keep that in mind when you're picking out a breed to be raising, is that if you're going to be selling it, if you want it to be an income source kind of into the general market, then you kind of want to pick a breed that's more widely recognized.
Correct.
So,
yes. Here we go.
I'm a retired butcher and chef over 50 years in the business. And I think the Hereford meat is a little sweeter and sometimes even more tender than a Black Angus.
Well, that is great to know.
Right.
Yay.
Yeah.
Go Herefords.
Right. And really, we're really excited because we're raising one this year that's half Hereford, half Jersey. And I'm sure as a chef, you've heard that the cross between Jersey and Hereford, or Jersey and Angus, is supposed to be amazing.
Yep.
In fact, we used to go to church with someone who has a ton of, he raises Black Angus, like some of the best Black Angus you can raise. And he has like a lot of them. And he would always tell me every year he tries to get a Jersey calf to raise for himself, even though he's like the best at raising Black Angus. He would prefer to have a Jersey calf for himself.
Have you thought of planting sorghum in your fields as fodder for your cattle? No. I don't know why. I guess my gut answer is our fields here are not good because of all the rock. I mean, and we're not talking like rocks, when like the little rocks. We're not talking about gravel. We're talking about like boulders.
Right.
We can't like plow easily and that kind of thing, can't plant easily, we would be able to reseed our hayfield with a special instrument that goes and like puts like holes in.
It's called a drill.
Okay, a drill. But we've never considered planting any kind of row crops or sorghum like that.
And to be honest, we don't need to.
Yeah.
Our grass does great. And, you know, basically most of our grazing pastures are native grass that do well for our area.
Okay. This is an interesting question from Paul. Is standing hay the same as stockpiling hay?
No.
Why?
In general, it is less nutritious, is my understanding. Yeah. When you cut hay, you're cutting it while the grass is still green, and all of those nutrients are up in the green part of the grass. And when grass dies back for like standing hay, a lot of that nutrients goes back down into the ground, into the roots, and they're basically eating it with less nutrients.
Right. Our current situation in our hayfield where our cows are at really is a mix of still green grass. Right. I would probably say it's 40% green, 60% brown.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're really monitoring their condition.
Right.
To make sure that they still look nice and plump and that their coats look nice and healthy. It's, I guess. At
some point soon, once it's really like all standing hay, we will probably give them what's called a protein tub, like the Crystalix tubs that we're always talking about that we grow in our greenhouse. Those come filled with a protein supplement for cattle. And when they're either on forage that doesn't have all the nutrition they need, or when they're on hay, it's good to give them a protein tub because it kind of makes up the difference between what they're lacking in the grass at that point. So.
This is a good question. Is it okay to raise a single cow for meat, or are they too social of an animal? I think it would be fine.
Yeah. They are social animals. They are herd animals.
Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes we impose our human feelings onto animals, and I think that might be one of them. Like right now, our dairy cow is alone. I mean, to some degree, she's not because she's in the same area that Watson and the two.
Right. She can get right up to them on a fence line.
Right.
So they're separated, but they still feel like they're a herd.
Right. So I would say yes and no.
Right.
What I would recommend actually is if you have enough room for 2 cows, to raise 2 cows, butcher one for yourself, sell the other one, and that will pay for at least your butchering expenses of the one you're going to eat, and possibly some or all of the hay that you need to buy, or some of the feed, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
That makes sense for me. Do you use rainwater or well water?
We use well water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have water lines running pretty much to all of our paddocks that come from our well. Now we do have ponds. We have several ponds on our property as well that the cattle can drink out of. Some of them they can go in, but no, we use well water. Really good well water.
Really good well water. If we needed to catch rainwater, because we get this question quite a bit, if we needed to catch rainwater, we have the ability to do so. We have lots of nice metal roof lines and could, downspouts and things that we could catch a lot of water if we needed it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We're always thinking that way. We don't talk about that much, but we're always thinking that way.
Right.
Here we go. Homestead Jude. Goats versus cows for meat and dairy.
You know what's really funny is we actually did a video one time about why goats are better than cows for meat and dairy.
Yeah. I've changed my mind.
Right. We should probably take that video down because
I don't know.
We've changed our mind.
We have.
You know, we made that video before we ever had any real experience with cattle.
Yes.
And now
I was petrified.
Right, because they're big.
They're
big,
huge,
they're intimidating.
Strong.
Here's the thing. If you have the room for cattle, I would 100% say cattle are easier.
Yes.
They're cheaper. They're going to give you more meat and more dairy for the amount of work that you put into them.
Absolutely.
But if you don't have the room, then absolutely go for goats because goats are still great.
Mm-hmm.
It gets you out of having to buy meat and dairy at the store.
Yes.
And it is it's still a great alternative.
Yes.
So I don't know. If you have the room, do cattle. If you don't have the room, do goats.
Yes.
And if you don't have room for either of those, go buy some meat from Rich and Shelly.
Yes. Awesome.
Or someone like them.
We've allowed a cotton and soybean farmer to rent our land for years. Is it possible to convert it for cattle use if we let it rest for a time, or is it ruined? Well, it's definitely not ruined.
No, I wouldn't think so.
No,
I mean, I don't know
absolutely.
exactly I don't know what those farming practices do to the land.
Cotton and soybean are both generally GMO, which means they are Roundup ready, which
Right.
means they could have probably been sprayed.
Right.
But there's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
If
you let it rest, it would probably be fine. It's out of my wheelhouse. It's out of my expertise to answer that question. But I would not think it's ruined. I would think it's going to need some work to get it back into a condition suitable. But honestly, what I would try to do is talk to some other kind of regenerative farmers in your area and ask them for their advice. Maybe even invite one over to look at the land, tell you what kind of grasses grow really well in your area, and kind of go from there.
And most of the seed companies, like ours would be like Hirsch or MFA, they offer seed blends for hay fields.
Right.
And so that they know grow really well in your area for pasture and for hay. And there might be different blends. There might be a hay blend versus a pasture blend. And they can help you figure out what would be best for your area. And then also make sure that you talk with them about where to get fertilizer. I know that that's kind of a dirty word sometimes in our, genre, but
when you're talking big pieces of land,
so here's the thing. We have a 20 or 23, 22 acre hayfield. And while we raise rabbits and have raised rabbits and things like that, we don't produce enough rabbit manure or even cow manure or anything to fertilize out that amount of land.
Exclusively with
right. So we do use standard fertilizer. And honestly,
we have a company who comes and spreads it for us every spring.
And the guy who cuts our hay actually will not cut our hay if we don't fertilize every year, because it makes that big of a difference. And it just isn't worth his time and fuel and energy and stuff to come and cut our hay if we don't fertilize it.
Right.
So you will see a big
difference.
But
I would try to talk to some like regenerative farmers in your area and see what they recommend.
Mm-hmm. This is a great question too. You guys have the greatest questions. From California Dreamer. Do you have your hay tested for nutritional value? What do you use to fertilize the hayfield? Well, we just kind of did some of that.
Answered that one. Mm-hmm. We don't have our hay tested for nutritional values, but we do soil testing so that when we order our fertilizer every year, first of all, we can put the minimum amount that we need on the hayfield, and also so it's formulated for exactly what we need for the hayfield for that year. Mm-hmm. So So we do soil tests, and you can usually do that through your local extension office, so that we know what kind of fertilizer to order.
Yeah. Have you thought about trying sheep? I raise for my homestead, and wow, so good.
We have thought about it. We have never raised sheep, and
we've helped work sheep.
Sure.
With Rich and Shelly.
Right. They raise a lot of sheep.
Yeah. But I think that we are going to leave sheep up to the experts.
Right.
And when we want lamb or, sheep meat, I guess, whatever. I don't know what you call it.
Sheep?
No, not sheep. We'll buy some from them. So at this time, we don't want to add sheep.
Right. But I've learned in homesteading and farming to never say we won't do something, because you never know what we might do.
We might get cats again one day.
Okay, we're never going to get cats again.
Okay.
We'll leave those to the experts as well.
Yeah. Are you still going to breed your milk cow to Watson?
Yes. Yeah. And hopefully, so she should be having a calf in December, and hopefully by February we'll breed her back to to Watson.
The reason why I'm not answering that is because just recently we got a comment from somebody who said, I have a lot of experience. I've been a farmer or something like that for a long time for jerseys. And your Jersey cow is exceptional. And it would do you really good, do you really well to AI her to get hopefully a heifer back out of her because she has such wonderful conformation.
That's
that's the only reason.
But the last time we did AI,
I know it took forever. So you're right.
And we ended up having to breed her to the bull anyway.
It was a nightmare. So I would be open to AIing her once to see if she would take, and if not, then have our bull. It's just so easy to have a bull, to just take care of it, and they're so good at it, and they're so persistent, and they're good almost every time unless there's something wrong with your cow.
Right. So the answer as of right now is yes, we're going to breed Watson to
We
Babe.
Probably will.
Yes.
Question from Heather Hall. I went to high school with a Heather Hall.
Maybe that's her.
Maybe it is. Heather Hall, is this you? Probably not. Question, do you have shelters located in each one of your paddocks for the amount of cattle you have?
No, we do not. We don't have shelters for any of our cattle.
There's a small shelter out in the dairy one. They never use it anyway.
Right, no. So we have a small shelter for our dairy cow, and when she has a brand new calf, like in the winter, they have access to a lean-to off the side of our barn as well. Other than that, no, our cattle are they're out on pasture all the time. And really here in our area, our winters aren't that bad. I don't know of anybody who has shelters for their cattle, for their beef cattle during the winter time.
They are so smart. They know to get out of the sun if it's hot. They know they know like what direction to like lay down in the field to make sure that the wind hits them so that they don't get too cold. They huddle up when they're cold. They just know what to do.
And our cattle are in the winter, they're in a more wooded area. So a lot of times they can get under trees, which gets them out of the wind. It gets them out of the ice if we have ice storms. But no, we don't have. It's not necessary in our area. And like I said, I don't know. This is cattle area where we're in, and I don't know anybody who has.
If they have shelter, it's for their hay.
Right.
Not for their cows.
True.
Yeah. Do you have an age max for your female beef cows? Honestly, we don't even know the age of most of them. The oldest ones, we don't even know how old they are.
As long as they are continuing to have a calf every year, and as long as their condition looks good and they are mobile and getting around, there's no reason, in my opinion, and talking to other farmers who have a lot more experience, there's no reason not to continue to breed them.
Right. Let's go down to here. Steph and Skip Kane, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. We appreciate that so much. They said, we are looking for land for retirement. How much land would you suggest for small animals and a large garden with an existing house? Well, first of all, we did a ton in the Phoenix area on 1.25 acres, but it was maxed out. Yeah. Maybe we have differing opinions.
My answer would be somewhere for like chickens and like small animals like that, plus a large garden and a house, I would say 5 to 10 acres. If you're not wanting to get into big animals like cattle at all, 5 to 10 acres would allow you to do everything that you could possibly want to do.
Yeah. That's exactly my answer.
There you go.
That's why we get along so well. Let's see. Do your cows need help birthing? We have not had a cow that has needed help birthing, not even our dairy cows. This coming calving season next spring will be the first time we have young heifers.
Right.
So
giving birth.
But Watson is a heifer bull.
Right.
Why don't you talk about what that is?
So when you buy a bull on their registration, and this is a good reason to buy a registered bull, even if none of the rest of our cattle are registered, but our bull will always be registered, because when you buy a registered bull or cattle, they have all these different numbers that are very complicated, but they mean all different things. And one of those numbers gives you an indication of how big their calves will be when they're born and how fast the calves will grow. So Watson comes from, they look back in the lineage at all of these cattle. And so Watson should produce fairly small to medium calves, but they should grow very quickly once they're born.
Right.
So that makes him what they call a heifer bull, which means he will be suitable for breeding heifers because the heifers can't handle giving birth to a really large calf. So hopefully we will not have any issues. I will tell you this, when we first got into raising cattle, I did buy what's called a calf puller, which is like a big ratchet type thing for helping to pull calves out of the mamas if you need help. And it's still in the box in the barn. I think it was a great investment, and hopefully it's an investment I'll never have to use.
Well, Rich let us know that was final question.
All right.
But let's do one more.
All right. One more.
Because this is important, because I think a lot of people wonder about this. How and when do you let people know you have beef cattle for sale?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the bottom line is right now, because we have so few calves, because we're still establishing our herd, we already have kind of permanent buyers.
Right.
So once we have more calves than we have buyers, then we will probably put that on our website and probably advertise that on our social media,
right,
that we will have them available.
Yeah.
But right now, because we're such a small operation, we already have permanent buyers for all of our calves.
Right. One thing I will say is when we redo our working facilities, one thing we're hoping to kind of get with our squeeze chute and everything is a scale so that we can sell more cattle and know how much they weigh, because we'll sell cattle by the pound when they're live, and we need to know how much they weigh, and that'll be a nice thing to have. So
yeah.
All right, so that was the final question. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with us again this week. We are loving these live streams. We were reluctant about doing them for so long, but now that we're doing them, we just really, really enjoy it, especially now that we have the new, faster internet. Maybe you guys could tell that we were able to do this one this week now in 1080 high definition instead of the lower quality we've done them in the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, before you go and before we go, if you'll let us know in the comments if you thought the quality was really good, did we freeze up at all? This is our first time. We can't tell from our end if we did any of that.
Right.
And
we're just talking and talking.
We do that.
We could just be frozen up.
We had 2 more pages of notes to talk about. We can talk a lot. Anything else before we go? I
don't think so, you guys. Thank you so much. Oh, one quick thing. If you guys, I know we've got a lot of praying people out there. If you could say a couple extra prayers for my dad this week. He's having some issues this week. I don't want to get into all the details, but if you guys just say some extra prayers for him this week, we sure would appreciate that. Also, with the election next week, everybody take a little time this week to pray for our country and our leaders. And no matter where you fall,
God's will be done.
God's will be done, and our leaders could definitely use our prayers. So we'll leave it on that note. We will see you back hopefully next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can't wait to spend some more time with you.
Thanks so much for stopping by the homestead. Take care, and God bless.
God bless.